Hi, Lisa Marie Kosis, founder of Global One Health. I've posted a video that talks specifically about the shoulder joint. In it, I address the different ranges of motion that the joint moves in, as well as the basic anatomical structure of the joint. I decided to do this because I think it's very important for people to understand a little bit about basic anatomy so that when they're exercising, they know what muscles are working and what movements should be done to strengthen certain muscle groups, especially if there's a weakness involved, but also so that when they move, they're keeping in mind what proper range of motion is and mechanics so that they can prevent risk of injury at all possible costs. In that video, I addressed that I would post another video that talks about what exercises that can be done to strengthen the muscles of that joint. So I'm going to address a few of those here. It's too many to post in one video, so I'll probably continue in this series, but I want to talk about some of the basics. So I had started talking about the lat muscles. So if you want to, and I do suggest checking out that video first so that you have a really good idea of what all the ranges of motion are of the shoulder joint and about each of those specific muscle groups. But I'm going to show you here at least the lat and the row exercise, as I want to talk about those muscles. When I started the shoulder video, I did start from the posterior side and the back side. So we're going to talk about two of those major back muscles that involve shoulder joint. So if you're doing lat pull downs, pull-ups, rows in any variation, you are addressing two major muscles of the upper mid-back area, and they also very directly involve movement of the shoulder joint structure. So that's why I want to talk about those in these videos. So I'm going to do a kneeling lat pull down. Obviously, not having access to machine and gym setting under the circumstances, I'm going to use a band. This is a monster band. You can use a TheraBand. Dumbbells you can also use, but I find that the band creates a little bit more ideal scenario, or the closest thing you can get to what holding a bar would be in a seated lat pull down on the machine, right? So that is what we're going to use in this video. So I'm going to face backwards. The lat muscles, just as a review, are the powerhouses of the back, and they exist pretty much covering a good percentage of the back to the lateral side of both sides of the rib cage. An important footnote that the lats attach to a small area on the humeral bone, the upper arm bone. So when a muscle contracts, it draws one bone, one limb towards another bony area. So when I contract my lats, they are pulling the humerus in towards my body. So the function of the lats is to adduct, right? Pull the arm in towards the midline. The lats are also internal rotators of the humerus, so that is something to keep in mind as well. So using the band, I'm going to hold my arms overhead. I'm going to create a little bit of tension on the band by pulling outward. Now that's going to enable a little bit of awareness or activation of this area of the back of the shoulder, so kind of up into the rear deltoid, and a little bit into a muscle here called the teres major. I mention that because it works in conjunction with the lats when doing pull downs. So while the lat is the major powerhouse of a pull down and a pull up, teres major is a much, much smaller muscle in size and power in comparison to the lat muscle, the latissimus dorsi, to name the anatomical name. But the teres major is called lat's little helper. So it's that muscle, that small little muscle area right up in here. So when doing a pull down, while you want most of the work to happen in the lat structure, you want to be thinking about that small muscle, and I'm pointing to it right now in this area because that should be engaging as well in the pull down. Now, you don't have the benefit when you're doing this at home of having a resistance overhead that you can pull against, so you really want to focus on getting the squeeze in your mind as you're doing the actual activation drill here. So I'm going to hold my arms in kind of a Y or a V position overhead, and I'm creating some tension on the band. What I want to do is I want to contract the lat muscles and create tension in them. So as I pull my arms down and my tricep, part of my upper arm, into my rib cage, this is the ending position I want to be in. It's kind of a little bit like a W in the arms, but I'm keeping tension throughout. Now the key is when I take my arms back up, especially here, but even when you're at the gym and you have the barbell or the bar overhead, you don't want to release the tension and just let the bar go up, or the band in this context, right? So if you do all this work to contract your lats and pull your upper arms into your rib cage, you want to maintain that tension. So the key thing is on the negative portion, as it's referred to in training, which is the return movement, you don't want to release the tension. It is not a letting go of the muscle contraction on the way up. It is simply an extension of the elbows or lengthening of the arms overhead, but you're not releasing the tension. Just like you wouldn't turn off the engine of the car at the red light, you just simply put your foot on the brake pedal, the car is still running, the engine is still going. You want to keep tension. That is a very important concept in all movement. Every movement has a negative. So if I do all this work to pull down in the muscle shortening in the activation phase, I keep the tension on the way up. So that is the classic position of what you want to be doing in a seated lat pull down. Here I'm doing it kneeling. You can be kneeling up this way as well. Of course, you can do it standing also. But that is the basic activation of doing a pull down. From a side view, one important thing to keep in mind is the position of the arm bone, especially the upper arm. So if I'm in this position here and I'm pulling down, when I pull down, because I do see clients doing this with the bar at the gym, they pull down and then the bar starts to go down and go forward. Notice what happened to my elbows. If my elbows start to move backwards in direction, it's going to cause a forward movement of the humeral head. If that happens, there's no way I'm getting full activation of my lats. And I say that because I've seen it quite a bit. So that can happen if you allow the bar or the band to move forward as you go down in movement, but also if you go down too far, right? So if the bar or the band starts to go down too close to the chest, the elbows are going to start to move in a backwards direction. You do not want to allow that to happen. Once the humeral head hooks forward, you are not getting the activation fully in your lats. So it's kind of a waste of your time and energy, but it's also putting the shoulder capsule, especially under load, in a compromised position. You do not want to be in this position in a pull down, a pull up, or even if you were doing a bench press. So that is an important thing to keep in mind is you have to maintain external rotation of the humeral bone to prevent internal rotation of the humerus, right? So isometrically, the rotator cuffs, the external rotator cuffs need to be turned on. So that is just an important point because I mention it because I do see that quite a bit. The stopping point is generally the band or the bar in that upper sternum, kind of adjacent to the clavicles, and you're keeping that tension. Now, a band gives you the opportunity to pull outward to feel a little bit more activation in the posterior side of the shoulder joint, but that's kind of the feeling you want to be thinking of, and this would be the bottom of your pull down or the top of your pull up. So that is how to address specifically the lats in pull down and pull up movement. And I'm going to also talk about the rhomboids and the rows in another video, just talking about that coming up next.